Welcome, everyone, to an FIR interview. We have a very special guest joining us today, someone who we first got together with from a podcasting point of view 20 years ago at the dawn of podcasting and the sunrise of For Immediate Release. We're thrilled to welcome Eric Schwartzman to the guest seat on this podcast. We're going to have a great conversation about something Eric wrote in Fast Company magazine that is quite an extraordinary take on something not good that's going on. Social media is being weaponized through sophisticated bot farm application is the central thesis of Eric's piece in Fast Company. The coordinated use of thousands of real smartphones and AI-generated content to manipulate public sentiment, deceive algorithms, and distort what people perceive as popular, true, or trustworthy. Looking forward to this conversation. I'm Neville Hobson in the UK.
I'm Shel Holtz in Concord, California. And Eric, it's great to see you. When you were contributing reports to FIR in the early days, you had a sign-on or a sign-off that talked about being from Hollywood, California, and you were doing entertainment PR. Rogers & Cowan specialized in entertainment PR. It's been a long ride since then.
Yeah, it's been a long time. That's what I was thinking as well. That's the song that popped into my head when I told my wife I was talking to Shel and Neville this morning. She remembers you both well. I used to say, from Eric Schwartzman, the entertainment capital of the world.
That's right.
And I created at the time what I thought was a podcast news release.
Yep.
And here's about it. You guys had already built the audience. You were about a year ahead of me. And I wanted to launch a show called On the Record Online, to build a market for a product called iPressroom, which I was building at the time. And I thought, why don't I do like small little segment versions of my interviews? I'll give them to Shel and Neville as sort of a segment that they can use in their show. But then at the end of my segment, I'll say, if you want the full interview, go to ontherecordonline.com, or it's ontherecordpodcast.com. Actually, it's so long ago, I didn't even remember that. But yeah, that's how we got started.
Fabulous.
And we enjoyed those segments tremendously. But you've moved on from entertainment PR. You're working in SEO. You're living in New York, and you're writing for Fast Company. How did that come about?
Well, I wrote my first article for Fast Company when I published my most recent book, The Digital Pivot. And I wrote a piece for them that did really well. And then after that, when I was working in SEO, I had this client that I literally X'd their revenue inside of 6 months, and they fired me. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And the client said to me, well, hey, we found these guys who can do what you're doing for a fraction of the price. They do black hat SEO. We're done with you. We're done with real content. And I said, okay, thank you very much. They paid their bill, no harm, no foul. And I figured I'll just watch because their traffic's going to tank, because I know that if you cheat Google, they're going to figure you out and they're going to, demote your rankings. And so I watched their site double in traffic from where I'd taken them, and then triple in traffic from where I'd taken them. So these black hat guys knew something I didn't. So I decided to take a walk on the wild side. I joined some black hat meetups, and I went to some conferences out of town, and I really dug into what they were doing and how they were doing it. And it was so fascinating. I went back to Fast Company and I said, hey, I got to write a story about this for you guys. And they were like, yeah, bring it on. So I wrote that story for them. And it was also about how AI is sort of changing Google. And that was the second story I did for them. And then around the time when Hamas infiltrated Israel on October 7th in 2023, there was a big wave of social media outcries about Israel rather than Hamas, who had been the perpetrator. And I looked into it and I thought, this doesn't look right. And it looked to me like there was a lot of bots making these things go viral that weren't in fact popular. And I started to look into that. And as I peeled back the onion, I found, well, it's not just elections. It's not just public policy. Really the elections and the beheading videos, those were the pioneers. But now it's big pharma, it's FinServ, it's celebrity reputations. I mean, pretty much everything is being bought and sold online. So these metrics that we used to see, likes, shares, comments, as a signal of authenticity and consensus, they're fake. And so that's the most recent story that I wrote for Fast Company.
Terrific. It was quite a read, Eric, reading your piece, your LinkedIn post, and then the Fast Company article. It was actually mind-spinning, I found it, the scope of what you wrote. Might help, I think, to kind of kick this off. Can you give us a better summary than the one I started out with, the central core of what this started with?
Well,
what is the
first of all,
story
let me
about?
say, I thought your summary was great. I thought you nailed pretty much the thesis of the article in a sentence. You know, to go a little deeper into it, essentially what's changed is they always had bot farms, but the bots were pieces of computer code that lived in data centers and manipulated algorithms by accessing the API of the social network. And those are a little easier to ferret out as inauthentic. What's changed now is you have these facilities that are basically data centers, but instead of having racks and racks of servers, they're racks and racks of mobile phones. And they're probably older mobile phones, you know, a little less expensive. And each of them is cabled to a central computer that essentially orchestrates coordinated engagement. So what do I mean by that? Well, they can find any post they like. It can be their post. It can be someone else's post. It can be a sock puppet post. It can be an avatar post. And they can target it with engagement. So like in the first 30 minutes of it going up, they can give it a certain amount of likes, a certain amount of comments, a certain amount of likes on the comments, a certain amount of profile expands, a certain amount of shares, reshares, reposts. And so there are many different actions, right, that can be calculated by the algorithm to decide what is popular. And they're hitting all of those. Now, it's one thing to do it from a piece of malicious code in a data center, but if you're doing it from an actual smartphone, right, if the smartphone passes the Turing test, it's very difficult for the social network to see that as inauthentic behavior. And they've gotten so good at it that it's basically industrial scale manipulation at this point. What shocked me most in the reporting was this. The bots aren't just impersonating us, they're outnumbering us. Real people are being drowned out by coordinated networks of AI generated profiles, right? They're each programmed to amplify a specific narrative. They have personas, they have profile pictures, they have histories, they have friends. These aren't isolated fakes, right? This is industrial scale manipulation.
That was one of the things that I found alarming, one of these insights in your article, about how sophisticated all this has become. Not just spamming, but embedding within communities and mimicking real users. So it's not just tech anymore, right? It's psychology. But I guess my question is a simple one. How worried should we be about AI-driven personas being used for social graph manipulation at scale? Are we entering a new era of influence operations? What should people be concerned about?
We've already entered it. We've already entered that era. Because the truth is this, like nobody listening to this podcast right now is going to learn for the first time that there's misinformation on social media. We all know that. There's stories about it all the time. But if you want a quick dopamine hit in a short period of time, you're still going to pick up your smartphone and doom scroll. And so it's so addictive. It's so invasive that even though people know it, they keep on scrolling, me included. And so until there's a media experience that replaces this, as long as this is the main media experience through which we consume news and information, I think, we should all be aware of the fact that our perceptions are now being shaped by industrial scale manipulation.
How many of these phone farms are there? I assume most of these are in places like Southeast Asia. How many of these are operating?
So there are state-sponsored bot farms that have access to means that are not normal, right? If the government is complicit, if the phone companies are complicit, then what does the Ministry of Information in Tehran look like? What does the Ministry of Information in China look like? What does it look like in Russia? Now, Russia, they are pioneers. They've been doing this from the beginning. They're very good at it. And they know how to promote content that will divide Western audiences. And that's really always the objective from state-sponsored manipulation, is how do we get them fighting amongst themselves so that we can divide and manipulate? That's sort of the objective. So you see issues which are highly divisive wedge issues, and those are the issues that get targeted for media manipulation by state sponsors. And then in Southeast Asia, particularly in places where labor is inexpensive, where power is inexpensive, and where there's minimal government oversight, that's where you have the commercial bot farms that will execute campaigns for a penny a post or a penny in action. And many of them are just available on Fiverr or Upwork. They typically will call themselves growth hacking, or they'll call themselves social media panels. So they're very easy to find, and pretty much anybody can just put in a credit card and buy likes or follows or comments. Follows have been around a while. What's new now is this coordination. And that's really more at the state-sponsored level, where they're able to actually target all this coordinated engagement in a short period of time to trick the algorithm into thinking something is popular when in fact it's not. I saw from threat detection companies who were graphing a lot of the discussions around what happened in Gaza, that 95% of the discussion is bot discussion. 5% is human. But if you think about that, right, if what you want to do is get your message in front of Western audiences, bot engagement becomes table stakes, because there's no way you're going to go organically viral if you don't have the bot virality to get seen in the newsfeed in the first place. And if everyone's doing it, you really have no choice.
I want to go back to the commercial aspect of this, where anybody can go to Fiverr and enter a credit card number and for a penny a post. Is that what Big Pharma is doing? Are they going to Fiverr and entering a credit card number?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know the exact means that they have access to. I can tell you what I did find, and I didn't include in my story because I didn't have enough information on it to include it, was that in the baby formula wars, there's been a lot of skullduggery around undermining the claims of one another's products on social media. Now the thing is, right, we used to be concerned about lies, right? Oh, people are lying. It's misinformation. It's a lie. It's no longer about the lie. It's about the targeted engagement on the lie, because a lie repeated often enough becomes truth. And so the targeted engagement is what's changing the truth. Now, if I want somebody to believe something, I don't even have to post it myself. I could just find someone else who's posted it, target that with engagement. Then I've got this sort of third party neutrality behind me, because it wasn't me that said it in the first place. And I can make them popular. People will trust them because they're a mom, or they're feeding their kid and they don't believe in this infant formula as a good product. All I have to do is just, if I'm the competitor, just target that with engagement, get people talking about it, and I've done my job. I'm just trying to divide and conquer. That's all. And that's how this game works.
It's interesting, Eric, you mentioned lies and truth, where black is white and white is black. And it makes me think, as a Brit here in the UK, of a certain person called Donald Trump, who seems to be leading the kind of shift in what people are willing to take notice of or accept, if you will. That is reflected in what I see in other governments around the world. But that prompts me to talk a bit about, to ask you about an example you mentioned in the article, that of the Blake Lively battle with the co-star of the film she was in, Baldoni, where it seems, or in fact it was talked about quite significantly, a particular PR agency was behind this in the smear campaign, which is probably putting it mildly, that I suspect much of what we've discussed so far might fit into what happened with that. Designed to shape public opinion before the damaging story hit, which is at the heart of PR ethics. So the question I have, I suppose, and I think I might know the answer, I want to get your take. Are we seeing a trend where digital manipulation becomes just another tactic in the PR toolkit? The worry there is that how do we address that in the profession at large to maintain ethical behavior? So where is the ethical line today, do you think?
Well, I would say, you're right. It's the same song with different lyrics. Character assassination has been digitized. I mean, it used to be that, the crisis people would comb through all the prior records of someone whose character they were trying to assassinate and damage their credibility as suspicious so that they could defend whoever their opponent was. So that's not new. I mean, that's been done for a while. On the whole ethics side, I mean, I kind of have to call foul there, because as someone who kind of grew up as a PR person and felt that we should be ethical, we should look for truth, and that's our job. It's not really the truth. That's not the truth. I mean, the truth is that the PR person who doesn't stand behind the story that the CEO is pushing gets fired. And that's the reality. This is a commercial enterprise. This is not, a grassroots activism here. And so, you look at even like big organizations like PRSA and the positions they take on difficult issues, which are non-existent. I mean, I think it's really toothless for us as PR people to sit, claim that we have some, higher moral ethic than anyone else out there. I mean, we're just as guilty as anyone else of, applying our narrative to try to sell soap.
I have to assume that Meta and X and LinkedIn are aware of the situation. Are they doing anything to address it? Do they have an interest in doing anything to address it?
Well, that's the great question. I mean, that's the kicker, right? The platforms know what's happening. Mm-hmm. They're not fooled. They're complicit, right? These fake engagement models make them money, so they let it ride, right? That's the difference between like ordinary disinformation and where we are now, right? The business model actually rewards synthetic virality. So it's crazy, right? They're making money off it. And, the funny thing is, after I published the story, I got so many leads from people with other interesting stories to write about, including ad fraud. One guy told me programmatic advertising is 90% bot impressions. I got to come on from a guy who has been taking a LinkedIn course from someone who mints thought leaders with ChatGPT and engagement pods and bot networks. The list goes on. There was so much stuff that I couldn't write about. It's like, I just basically, scratched the tip of the iceberg here. This runs very deep. And so, it's funny, you've got these people out. We were one of them. Like, I feel guilty now as the guy who did the social media boot camp for 10 years for PRSA, like flying all over the country saying, hey, this is the future. This is what we should do. This is direct communications. You can get around the gatekeeper, wisdom of the crowds. You guys know all this horse shit. And that's not what happened, right? What happened was manipulation is what became democratized. So it's crazy, man. It's crazy where this has led us. But survival of the fittest, Darwinian theory, maybe it's a failing of the species. I don't know.
Not a pretty picture you're painting there, Eric. So there's no hope for trust and authenticity anymore, maybe, is what I'm perhaps taking from what you're saying. Is there a way back from this, do you think? Tools, regulations, maybe public awareness campaigns that give you hope we can restore some integrity to online discourse, or is it too late?
Well, there is integrity for me, and I'm able to get that integrity by being really disciplined and selective about the content that I engage with. I consume much less short form news. I consume more mainstream media. Typically, I like weekly news. I like journals. I like periodicals. But I read very critically now. I'm an avid reader. I read newspapers every day. I love newspapers. I love magazines. I love broadcast journalism. And there are some sources with blogs that I like as well. But I'm not getting my news off TikTok. That's for sure. I mean, I guess that most of us in PR thought that organic traffic meant something, right? And that's been my thing in digital, organic rankings, organic content. But in this ecosystem, what looks like organic reach can actually be bought, right? A penny a click. And so likes, shares, comments, all manufactured. That puts a huge question mark on the value of earned media and on the credibility of what we call influence. So, where it goes from here, I got to think, mainstream organizations, particularly organizations whose stocks are traded on public markets, they're always going to need someone to help them with their public record, managing their public record, managing their information. And then I think, there's a lot of people putting out interesting research. I think if you're putting out interesting research, promoting that as well is something that's worthwhile. But I definitely think in the lifestyle game, Well, let me change what I'm going to say there. When it comes to lifestyle, I think this is the future here. This fake engagement is the future. There was recently a skit on Saturday Night Live. It was the one where the girl who won, or who was the star of Honora, the movie which won Best Picture this year, won, and it was a little movie, and they were walking around Manhattan. Oh, what are we going to do on the weekend? We're going to wait in line for a pop-up restaurant that we saw trending on TikTok. And apparently that's what young people do. They look for, oh, this is the hot place to go have pizza. And they stand in line for 3 hours to have pizza. Oh, this is the place to have a salad. This is the place to have a macchiato or whatever the hell it is. And then in the skit, when they get to the front of the line, they get the pizza. How was it? Oh, it was good. And then they go on and get in another line, right? But that type of thing, right, where the line is the consensus and says, oh, there's demand, therefore we want, that consensus is manufactured on TikTok and on Instagram now, because the post goes up, it's targeted with fake engagement, it goes viral, they build the line, and everybody goes and buys the pizza. So I think particularly with local businesses, and particularly with lifestyle and fashion, I think this type of trickery is now mainstream and part of the arsenal.
Yeah, it was Mikey Madison. She won Best Actress too, and that was a funny skit. I saw that.
You saw it?
I did. Yeah, we watch SNL every week.
Eric, I'm watching as I was writing the story. I'm watching it. And I'm thinking, do they even know that this is because of bot traffic? And they probably don't.
They probably don't care either, which leads directly to my next question. Eric, you announced publication of this article on LinkedIn, and your post blew up. Lots and lots of comments, lots of shares. And yet, beyond that reach that your post got, I didn't see this spread the way I thought it would. I thought this would lead to congressional hearings. I thought this would lead to New York Times exposés, and it didn't. Why do you think that this didn't go viral itself? Is it because the bot farms didn't support it with engagement? Is it just because people don't care? Okay, so bots are influencing what I'm seeing. I'm still going to doom scroll when I'm bored. Why didn't this get more attention than it did?
Well, I thought it got a lot of attention. It's got more attention than anything I've ever shared or published in my life. So I'm looking at the impressions here on LinkedIn. First of all, let me tell you on Fast Company, it was a top 3 article for the month. It published towards the end of the month, and it was a top 3 article for the month. They publish a lot of news.
Yep.
So I would say, and that's a lot of attention. And then I share it on LinkedIn, and I got 547,000 impressions, 360,000 members reached, 5,472 comments, 5,472 reactions, 671 comments, 463 reposts, and there's a bunch of other posts that other people like Mitch Joel and Josh Bernoff and other folks have posted that have gone viral as well. So I got to think most people have seen this story. The truth is, I don't know how many people actually click through and read the story.
Right, but all of this, and it's very impressive, don't get me wrong, but it's all ripples from what you produced. I haven't seen, say, like I say, the Washington Post, the New York Times, NBC News, pick this up and run with it and start to sort of spread this beyond your circle. And that confounded me. I actually expected to see much more uptake. Even, like I say, in congressional circles, I expected to see more uptake on this. And it seemed like a big shrug beyond your circle.
Well, I can tell you that I'm getting featured on the FIR podcast for the story.
Well, that's the height.
Exciting.
That's the pinnacle.
Maybe I needed to do a better job sending it out to more people, because I didn't really do that. Maybe I should have put out a press release about the story and sent it to Washington insiders. I did get contacted by folks that I've worked with at State Department. Folks at DOD did reach out to me. So, I mean, I think it's out there. I sort of seeded the marketplace with this. But keep in mind, with all due respect to Fast Company, it's Fast Company. And Fast Company is not the New York Times. It's not the New York Times Magazine. It's not the Atlantic. It's not the New Yorker. It's not the New Republic. And so, it doesn't have the same cachet as one of those publications would. And that probably has something to do with it. I mean, I can tell you, the folks at Google, when I interviewed them for my last story, said, well, gosh, this is a story for a top-tier business publication. But apparently there are no top-tier business publications anymore. There's just, the ones that I mentioned previously, which really do, I think, command the sort of intelligentsia, the global intelligentsia. Who would it be in England, Neville?
It would probably be the Sunday Times on a weekend, but the mainstream media broadsheets, not the tabloids necessarily. Again, depending on the audience you want to hit. So
what about
similar
the FT?
picture. Well, the FT, sure, but that's a global publication. Well, the Sunday Times is too, for that matter. But domestically focused, it's the usual suspects. So it's not like so-called new media has emerged that captures huge audiences of the type, how can I put it, that matters in this context of our discussion. You'll get the volume, sure, you'll get millions of eyeballs on something, but that's not the same as actual engagement, where someone then takes that and moves it on. I've not seen myself much comment on this in the UK. I've seen from people that I follow or connect with on LinkedIn as just one media example. Quite a lot in the US, obviously, to reflect what Shel's saying. But it got me thinking, you mentioned Mitch Joel. I read his riff on your post. That was a super article you wrote. I mean, it went long. It was long. But he said a couple of things here I want to get your take on, Eric, because no one's really commented to Mitch on that. He talks about his provocation, where he says, what happens when fake accounts outnumber real ones? I would say they've probably done that already, right?
They already do.
When virality becomes a hoax, he says, when the signal to noise ratio is so broken that truth sounds like a minority opinion, the bots aren't here to persuade you, they're here to exhaust you. Thoughts on that?
Well, let me tell you what happens when the bots outnumber the people, okay? When the bots outnumber the people, terrorists can cross an international border, execute 1,500 people in their homes, take 250 hostages back to their country, and the very next day, people are protesting in favor of the terrorists on campuses in the US. That's what happens. That's what that looks like. Or I guess another thing you could say is that UK, Brexit. Brexit was largely, targeted by the Russian bot farms, which is what, that's what happens. What happens is authoritarianism, fascism, populism. That's what happens. What happens is at the Academy Awards, Best Picture, the director who accepts Best Picture thanks the sex workers for helping them out to win the best picture. I mean, we are living in a world that is on its head. And I would say there are universal truths out there. We know right from wrong inherently inside of us, and we can feel it viscerally when we are being lied to or when something unjust is happening. And I think what's happening now is our temperament, our voting decisions, our investment choices, everything is being controlled and manipulated at a mass scale by these bot farms.
Which I think either people don't realize it or many do and don't really care. I mean, what you're saying, Eric, makes total sense to me. I just look around me, just speak for myself here, in kind of amazement most days at what people are saying, particularly people in leadership roles in politics. I mean, Mr. Trump is the pinnacle of this, where you think this person needs to lead, set an example, and uphold the values you just outlined. Have we shifted so much as a global society and then individual country societies where that no longer matters? Otherwise, surely we'd have protests in the streets, literally the storming of parliaments and things like this to stop this happening. None of that's been happening.
Well, we're always trying to change minds in our business, in PR. We're trying to change people's minds and win their support, right? We're trying to get them on our side. So how do you do that, right? I do find sometimes I have a bias or a penchant for a particular belief, and I'll see opposing messages on social media, and it will get me to think, I wonder if I'm right about that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe their idea isn't a bad one. And then I'll see it over and over again. And I'm starting to question my own beliefs. And I think that's, what really Joseph Goebbels, who was the Ministry of Propaganda for Hitler in the Third Reich, realized early on is that a lie repeated enough times becomes truth. And if you can repeat it, especially through multiple channels, if you can repeat it through the media and you can repeat it through public meetings and posters and radio and people talking to each other, well, that's all now so easy to do. You don't need barrels and barrels of ink to do it anymore. All you need is a penny a click and a few manipulative posts with the image generated by AI and something that's going to pull the heartstrings of the people who don't necessarily know the history or the story behind the story. And you're going to win allies. And that's what's happening.
Is there a solution to this, or is this just the way it is? I mean, what can we do about this?
But let me tell you something that an engineer shared with me while I was writing the story. And this is an engineer who does all sorts of threat detection reports and analytics. And what he said was, the rate at which AI is advancing, the rate at which image creation tools are advancing, they far outpace the rate at which social media algorithms are advancing. Social media algorithms of today are largely the social media algorithms of yesteryear. They haven't kept them up to date. And so as long as they don't keep them up to date, I think we're really, we're in a tough spot. But they could be updated. And this sort of trickery could be ferreted out. But obviously to do so would be for them to reduce the number of users and session time that they have to monetize. So it really is a challenge. I wish after writing this, I had some grand idea of how to solve it. This is a very thick issue, and I'm honestly not really sure what the answer is to fixing it.
And I'm wondering about an implication of this in terms of all of this content that is being generated, particularly in the comments that are left. We know, for example, that all of its content is used by Grok, Elon Musk's AI model, to train it. So is all of this bot-generated content being used to train future AI models?
So I didn't cover this in the story, but I did actually get into this with another research organization. There is a network that Russian Ministry of Information created called the Pravda Network. And the Pravda Network is a network of doppelganger media sites that closely mirror US Western news sites. And they publish misinformation. And these are intentionally used to alter the content on Wikipedia. Wikipedia doesn't publish any original information. It all has to be sourced. And so by publishing this misinformation and then going in and editing Wikipedia articles and attributing the change to the misinformation, that's how Russian actors are intentionally duping the LLMs into believing their side of the story. So they're essentially rewriting history because Wikipedia is seen as wisdom of the crowd's truth, when in fact, if someone's getting paid to create the truth, they're always going to outnumber, the good actors who come in on their off hours to try to set the record straight. And so these doppelganger networks are being used to rewrite history and misinform LLMs as well. And it's sort of a five-pronged approach. If you look at it on a big picture, you see misinformation playing out through a number of different channels, playing out in organized fashion through universities, playing out in organized fashion through Cs and nonprofits in the UN, playing out through Wikipedia, playing out through the news media, and then playing out through social media. And you sort of see it in all those areas. I guess if there was a book to be written on a big scale about what's happening, those are the five fronts.
You've actually given a nice segue here with that last comment, Eric, because our discussion, it seems to me, it's been terrific. B, we're scratching only the surface, and C, this is a precursor to what's coming, as I see it, which is your new book. So tell us a bit more about Invasion of the Bot Farms. Great title. Would make a good Star Wars series, perhaps, with a title like that, I think. What should readers expect? What's the message you hope to get across beyond this Fast Company piece?
So Ronan Farrow did a documentary. I think it's on Netflix now about misinformation campaigns and how they're used and how they've been used by governments who are using an Israeli product by a company called NSO called Pegasus, which is basically a tool used by governments to hack into smartphones and spy on people. And I guess he did it around one company and one product. What I want to do is I want to do that story around all companies and all products. And, I'm not looking to tell an academic story here. I'm looking to tell an interesting narrative that's got, characters that are involved with it, their lives. I mean, I find that, and you may too, when you work with someone for public relations, as you get to know them, you become sympathetic to their cause, what they're trying to do, support their families, support their kids. Everybody's doing it because they're trying to support their families and support their kids. I do prescribe to the myth of pure evil. I think no one's really doing anything to be bad. They're basically going along to get along, or they're trying to make a buck to feed their family, or so that they can have more than everyone else, or get a better table at the restaurant, or fly first class, or whatever hell it is. But it's usually greed motivated. And so I want to tell the story from a personal standpoint and with a lot of case studies. And so that's the book that I'm working on, Invasion of the Bot Farms.
Well, Eric, this has been terrific. I'd like to close it out with the question we always close our interviews with, and that is, what question didn't we ask you that you wish we had or thought we would?
Honestly, I didn't come into this with any preconception of what you guys were going to want to discuss. And I feel perfectly satisfied with what we did discuss. But I'm happy to discuss anything else if you'd like.
Well, there's an intro for us.
Well, I could keep this going for quite a while, but in the interest of time,
yeah, probably a teaser. We'll leave our listeners with a tease for the book that's coming. In that case, Eric, and I think we've done that. It has been a great discussion, and you're right. There's lots we could go further on this, but this is probably a good quantity of information, quality-wise, for the listeners, and hopefully we'll get some comments. It'd be great if we had some comments or questions for you even. So it's been good.
I guess the one last thing I'll say is, the way I'm doing the book is I'm publishing each of the chapters as magazine articles. So if you want to get those, send me a request on LinkedIn and let's link up. And then when the next one comes out, you'll get it.
That's terrific. Good call. Call to action for listeners.
Any place else people can follow you besides LinkedIn?
That's pretty much the one I'm using now, partly because I thought it was immune to organic corruption. But as I found out now, that's not the case. There's all sorts of bot skullduggery happening there as well.
Just as
Stick
susceptible
with your
as
own
anybody
domain
else.
is the answer to that one, I think. Your own domain is the only place you can trust, I would say.
Just going to have to create Signal private chat groups. That's all. Eric, thanks very much. This has been great.
Thanks, guys. It's great catching up with you again.
Thank you.